This conference comes at a critical time. Aid agencies and the United Nations say they aren't receiving enough support to help the 1.2 million refugees in Uganda.
The quality of the camps that people can live in will go down, and you will see a lot of refugees really with no support.
Before leaving for Uganda, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres told reporters in New York that more people are being forced to flee wars and disasters than at any point in our lifetimes. And the Refugee Solidarity Conference now aims to raise $8 billion to help support refugees in Uganda for the next 4 years. Guterres says a global response is needed.
Countries are asking those in the developing world that host the largest number of refugees to keep them, but are not providing the necessary support for that to be possible. Stronger solidarity to refugee hosting countries in the global south is absolutely a must.
The UN says roughly 20 million people across parts of Africa alone are battling famine and at risk of starvation. They've requested $23.5 billion to fund their worldwide humanitarian projects, but so far have received just a quarter of that amount. And many are concerned by US President Donald Trump's threat to cut back on UN funding.
There's the capacity of seriously damaging some programs, some instruments, some tools like the blue helmets that are, trying to keep peace in the world.
But the UN hope the conference in Uganda can still make a real difference. The conflict in South Sudan has driven nearly 1 million people across the border into Uganda, and aid agencies say they're struggling to cope. But while the funds are desperately needed, analysts warn that any pledges made should be taken with a pinch of salt. William Denslow, CGTN, New York.
Let's discuss this further with Hassan Kaps Fungaroo. He's a Ugandan Member of Parliament representing one of the communities hosting refugees in the northern part of the country. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Uganda currently hosts the highest number of refugees in Africa. How is the country and communities like the one you represent coping with this situation?
Yeah, thank you very much. The communities in Uganda, particularly in the West Nile region and the Obongi constituency of Moyo district, which I represent in the Parliament of Uganda, are coping with the large number of refugees and the weak support coming from the aid agencies, the UN, through self-help at the community level, through community refugee solidarity. The host community has played a great role. Right from the beginning when the refugees started entering Uganda, my district of Moyo, my constituency of Obongi, just received the refugees, and women went fetching water from their pots, getting food from their gardens. But this is getting stretched to the limit. What we are moving towards right now is encouraging the refugees also to get engaged in economic production. We have offered them land outside the UN arrangements. We have offered them land outside the official government arrangements. Ours is a community-to-community solidarity, because the refugees coming from South Sudan are connected to us socially, culturally, because they are the same people. On both sides of the border, across the borderline, you find people speaking the same language, they have the same culture, they have supported each other before in terms of hosting refugees. We ourselves as people of West Nile were refugees in South Sudan and in the Eastern Congo during the time when the government of President Idi Amin was overthrown. These same people hosted us from 1979 up to 1985, 86, when we came back to Uganda. We see it also that they are our people. Difficult as the situation is, people have to struggle together. This is what is happening in West Nile. So
now,
we encourage the refugees to engage themselves in economic production, only if...
You mentioned, sir, that you need for these refugees to be economically independent, and we do know the Ugandan approach of providing land and allowing refugees to engage in economically beneficial activities has been praised. as one of the most humane in the world. Question is it sustainable?
You see, the problem is, that one is sustainable only if the role of the host community is recognized. The land given to the refugees doesn't belong to government. It belongs to our people, our communities. But the government of Uganda and the international community seems to not be recognizing the contribution of the host community. The host community was the first to offer the support. Number two, the host community knows that the coming of refugees also is associated with some benefits. Where we are hosting the refugees, our area is equally economically underdeveloped. The area is poverty-stricken. The area has poor infrastructure. But if the aid agencies coming to help the refugees could contribute in the construction of the roads, in the construction of health centers, which we share with the refugees, in the construction of markets, access to markets, in the helping of the refugee and the children of the natives to access good schools, the goodwill of the natives and the host communities will be sustained. The biggest danger to this, which makes the Ugandan model unsustainable, is if the system loses the trust of the host community, the trust of the people who have given the land, the contribution of theirs, if it is not rewarded in a way of let them feel progress in terms of improving the infrastructure, that's where the problem is. We should not look very far only to get resources from abroad when we don't harness the local ones here. So we need the local people to feel the benefit of hosting refugees. This is where the problem is. The local governments of Uganda are not recognized by the refugee law. The Refugee Act 2006 does not provide any role for the district local governments to play in the hosting of refugees. And people feel they are not being taken seriously. They are being undermined by even our own government from the center. The Office of the Prime Minister, the UN agencies don't recognize and don't take us seriously on the ground. That's where the danger lies.
I'm afraid, sir, we have to leave it there. We're running out of time, but we appreciate you joining us on the link. That was the Ugandan Member of Parliament, Hassan Kaps Fungaroo. John Shade, back to you.